What are three things you should get from a land surveyor on your next set of civil engineering plans? I found that oftentimes the surveyor that does the work to support a set of civil engineering plans is often invisible to the client or the project owner or the construction manager. So often the surveyor is invisible. You get a set of civil engineering plans and you don't know anything about the survey work that was done for the plans. And that's a bad thing. What that means is there's often critical survey information that's needed to properly build a project, the project that's described in the plans, but that critical survey information isn't in the civil engineering plan set or the other contract documents. And that's a bad thing, right? Nobody wins in that situation. So if you're a project owner, a construction manager, or a civil engineer, and you're watching this video, what should you get from a land surveyor on your next set of civil engineering plans, right? So if you're a project owner or a construction manager, you should demand this of the civil engineer that's preparing your plans. And if you're a civil engineer, you should demand this information from the surveyor that is doing the surveys for your set of civil engineering plans. Okay, so I'm going to give you three things that you should get from a land surveyor on every set of civil engineering plans. Okay, I'm not saying this is the only three things, but this is, I think, the three most important things that you should get. Okay, so the first thing you should get from the land surveyor is the survey control and coordinate reference system data that was used for the boundary and topography survey that formed the foundation or the basis for the civil engineering design. Okay, so survey control is critical to making sure that the design improvements get put in the correct location, right? The location where they were designed to be put. Okay, so you need to use the same primary control points that were used for the boundary and topography survey for the construction layout. Okay, if you don't do that, you're going to have problems, right? What that means is when you're doing the topography and boundary survey, you have to think about how you're going to, set and preserve control and then provide that control to the construction surveyor so that the project can be properly built. So the plans need to show sufficient on-site and off-site control points, right? And those off-site control points are important because oftentimes when you're working on a civil engineering project, they're going to scrape the site, right? They're going to grub or scrape the site, and all your on-site survey control, or a lot of it's going to be destroyed. So you need to think about that. So the surveyor should spell out what control points were set for the boundary and the topo survey, if they are or are not acceptable for construction layout. If they're not acceptable for construction layout, the surveyor should explain what needs to be done to get them acceptable for construction layout. The surveyor should spell out how the survey control needs to be monitored and maintained during construction. Okay, at a minimum, that work should be done by a licensed land surveyor. And then the surveyor should also provide what we call the coordinate reference system information that's needed to understand the control point coordinates. Okay, so that's the horizontal and vertical datum, the map projection, the unit system, the reference documents, the control points that were held for the horizontal and vertical control information. All that needs to be explained, and all that information, that's a lot if you think about it, right? What control was set? How is it used? Is it suitable for construction? How does control need to be set for construction? How does control need to be monitored during construction? What's the basis of the control coordinates that you're seeing on the plans or in the CAD drawing? Okay, so how do you communicate that information in the plan set? It's really simple. Use a survey control sheet or sheets with notes in the plans. Every set of civil engineering plans should have a control sheet. And I'm not talking about a 3-sentence benchmark statement. I can't tell you how many plans I see there's a 3-sentence benchmark statement. That's it. That is not a control sheet, and that is not enough information to properly lay out the project. So you need a survey control sheet with notes, and that should be signed and stamped by a licensed land surveyor. Shouldn't be signed by a civil engineer, right? I just recently had a project come up. Civil engineer signed a control sheet. They at least had a control sheet, but they signed the control sheet, and there was some missing information in the plans, and it ended up resulting in a couple foot bust on the site, and after concrete had been poured. So it was a bad deal. So if you're a civil engineer, work with the land surveyor, get them to include a control sheet in the plans, and make sure they sign that sheet. I don't know why civil engineers try and do that themselves. They let the electrical engineer sign their sheets, or the geotechnical engineer or the structural engineer sign their sheets. let the land surveyor sign the control sheet. Okay, the second thing that you need to include in any set of civil engineering plans, at least here in California, is you need to include some information about monument preservation. I find that this is frequently left out of civil engineering plans, but it's a requirement of state law. And the law says, state law says, the civil engineer can be held responsible if monuments are destroyed and not replaced on a project. So you want to include monument preservation information in your plan set to do two things. Number one, to prove that you complied with the requirements of the law. And number two, to actually enable a surveyor to preserve monuments during construction. Okay, so what type of information do you need to get from the surveyor in your civil engineering plan sets? He needs to tell you where the found monuments are, where he looked for monuments and didn't find any. He needs to indicate what he thought the construction, or he or she thought the construction limits were, the construction zone was. They need to indicate if a monument gets destroyed or damaged, how it's going to be replaced, what type of monuments are going to be required to replace a monument that is damaged or destroyed. And then they need to have, there needs to be some notes in there about what needs to happen for monument preservation during construction. You know, you need to put some standard notes in there. What happens if the contractor destroys a monument? Who's responsible for paying for it? When does it get replaced? All that stuff should be addressed in the plans or the contract documents. Okay, how do you provide this information, this monument preservation information in the civil engineering plans? It's really simple. Have a monument preservation sheet or sheets. Okay, they're going to show all the monuments that were found, right, in the surveys to prepare for the civil design, or monuments that could be at risk. You need to show the monuments. You need to show what they are. You need to show where they came from, right? And you need to explain how they need to be preserved or replaced, right? Those sheets in the plan set, the monument preservation sheets, should be signed and sealed by a licensed land surveyor, just like the control sheets. Same kind of principle. All right, so here's the last thing, number 3. The third thing that you should get from a land surveyor on your civil engineering plans, and that is information on the retracement of parcel boundaries, easements, and building setbacks that were performed, the retracements that were performed to enable the civil engineering design. So unless you're putting you're working on 1 acre in the middle of a 200-acre parcel, you better have a boundary survey if you're doing a set of civil engineering plans, right? And this is something I often find civil engineers try to cut corners on, right? So if you're a project owner or construction manager, you do not want to go to construction with a set of civil engineering plans that weren't based on a good boundary survey. That is always a recipe for disaster, right? So you want to make sure that your engineer has based their design on a good boundary survey, right? And you want to communicate that information in the plans. So what kind of information am I talking about? The information shown should include the deed references, the map references, the found monuments, and notes on how the surveyor retraced the boundary. Everything that a construction surveyor would need to properly lay out the boundaries, easements, and setback lines on the ground should be included in the civil engineering plan sets. And that information on the boundary, the easements, and the setback lines, that information should be referenced to the primary survey control that's shown in the control sheet, right? So how do you do this? You show a boundary sheet or sheets with notes that's signed and sealed by a licensed land surveyor. Same principle, right? Now, in this particular case, if you wanted to, it'd be acceptable to have the surveyor prepare in California, let's say he prepares a record of survey that includes all that information that's filed separately, and then your plans could reference to that document. That would be okay. But I think a good practice is to just include the information right into the civil engineering plans. Okay, why is that important? This third item, you don't want to build stuff that crosses a property line or a right-of-way line or violates a building setback, right? That's a huge deal. The only way to make sure that that doesn't happen is to have a good boundary survey as the basis of the civil engineering design, and to make sure that the information gets into the plans that allows the construction surveyor to lay out the improvements where they are intended to go, and to lay out those other controlling lines, the right-of-way lines, the boundary lines, and the easement lines, and the setback lines, okay? So there you go. 3 things you need in every single set of civil engineering plans: survey control information, monument preservation information, and information on the boundary retracement that was performed for the civil design. If you don't have those 3 things from a land surveyor in your set of civil engineering plans, you have an incomplete set of civil engineering plans. It is going to cost you money during construction. Don't let that happen. If you are working on a project right now and you've got a set of civil engineering plans and you don't think it has one of those 3 things, send it to me in an email. We will review those plans for free and let you know what the surveyor needs to provide for the plans so that you can go to construction with a good set of plans and a good set of contract documents.